I think that the Australian public, at least where their thoughts are engaged, I think the public are pretty sensible. And I think the public concluded at least 6 months ago that the Albanese government definitely did not deserve to be re-elected. Have they concluded that the Dutton opposition deserves its go? Well, that's what the next 3.5 weeks are all about.
2025 is a year of change. Cultural and political disruption is transforming our nation and the global order. The rebellion against the establishment has accelerated. Australia and the Western Alliance is now at a crossroads. Either the mainstream will continue its ascendancy or the elites will prevail.
Welcome to Australia's Future with Tony Abbott. My name is John Roskam. I'm a Senior Fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs. Dan Wild, our regular host for Australia's Future, is on the campaign trail as we speak. So that's why I'm talking to Tony Abbott today, Distinguished Fellow of the IPA, about the campaign, about Tony getting mobbed at the Elizabeth Shopping Centre in North Adelaide, and also about Trump's tariffs. Tony, there's no shortage of things to talk about.
It's election season, John, so there's an enormous amount to talk about because nothing is more important to our immediate future than the best possible election result. We need a better government, and I hope everyone at this time is working as hard as they can to give Australia a better government. And look, it was great last week to be spending time in the Adelaide electorate of Spence with our friend and the usual host of this podcast, Daniel Wild. Dan's doing a very good job. He's showing a ton of energy, a ton of commitment. And as he says, Spence is the epicentre of the cost of living crisis. These are aspirational people, many of whom are doing it very tough. They're very conscious of the fact that on average our living standards have declined almost 9% over the last 3 years. They're very conscious of the fact, because they feel it in their daily lives, that GDP per head has gone back for 2 successive years. And of course, Spence is probably the most car-dependent electorate in the country and is going to be a big beneficiary from Peter Dutton's cut in the fuel tax. 72% of Spence people drive to work. 54% of Spence people have 2 cars, 20% of Spence people have 3 or more cars, and 98% of their vehicles are internal combustion engines. So Spence is going to be a key beneficiary of Peter Dutton's budget reply initiative, the 50% cut in the fuel tax. So it was great to be on the ground with Dan.
It's a dead red seat. There's another statistic, Tony, about Spence. They voted 70% no. These are Labor voters who didn't want to be divided by race. What did they tell you on the ground? Because this is a 12% Labor seat. This has been a seat taken for granted by the Labor Party for a long time. So what are these traditional Labor voters telling you? Dan said, I think they had to shut the shopping centre because there were so many people, and then you went to the pub for a rally and there were 300 or 400 people there, and they'd never seen so many people ever. What was the feeling on the ground?
Look, there's no doubt it's the most enthusiastic Liberal campaign in Spence ever. Spence is a relatively new seat, but we've got a very good candidate. We're running a serious campaign. And I just think this could be a boil-over because, as we've discussed, John, over the years, poorer people are voting more right. Richer people who can afford luxury beliefs are voting more left. And I think Spence is really that Australian heartland, decent working people who love our country, who don't want to see our country rubbished, who don't want to see our country divided, particularly divided by race. And they do feel neglected by the Labor Party. The Labor Party has tended to take their votes for granted.
Tony, what did people say were the issues specific to Spence and North Adelaide?
Well, apart from cost of living, which is an issue everywhere, I guess the big thing in Spence and so much of outer metropolitan Australia is congestion of the roads. Now, it was good to be back in Adelaide because as Prime Minister, I committed $1 billion to begin the major upgrade of the north-south road to freeway standard from the very north to the very south of Adelaide to connect up all the unconnected bits. And I think people remember that the Abbott government was all about building better roads. But there's a particular issue in Spence. It's Curtis Road. It's basically a 2-lane road. It's a clogged artery, an absolutely clogged artery. And I know that what Dan would like to say to the people of Spence is that if he's elected within one term, he guarantees that he will get the money to turn Curtis Road into 2 lanes each way. That's the best thing that I think a new and better local member could do for the electorate of Spence.
I mean, you talked about this. There was a wonderful article by David Pempathy in The Australian on the weekend, and you talked about the road, you talked about the empty shops that you saw. What did you see on the ground?
Well, the shopping centres are a bit different because management do their best to ensure that there are no empty shops, but the Main Street strip shops are a different story altogether. And in all of the main streets, there are lots of empty shops. Gawler had about 5 or 6 empty shops in a row. Now, given that Gawler is a relatively prosperous part of the electorate, given that Gawler has a lot of tourist potential, it's a very pretty village, Gawler, to see so many empty shops in Gawler itself was a real worry. But as I said, there's just this sense that the seat has been taken for granted.
What will get traditional Labor voters to vote Liberal, perhaps for the first time since they voted for you?
Well, I think there's 2 things. The first is a realisation that they really are being dudded by the current government. And let's face it, all of our big problems are being made worse by the current government. Our economy is in serious decline. Partly that's Labor's insane energy policy, the emissions obsession, the renewables only electricity policy. Partly it's their union links and the fact that this is productivity destroying. Partly it's the spending addiction, which means that your mortgage interest rates are higher for longer than they otherwise would be. So I think people appreciate that the Albanese government is at the heart of the cost of living crisis. It's brought on, to a great extent, the cost of living crisis, which is worse in our country than any other developed country. I also think that there are still strong memories of the Voice, the unnecessary attempt to divide us by ancestry or race. I think that people in Spence, a lot of migrants in Spence, there's working class British migrants who came in the 50s, 60s and 70s.
£10 palm.
Exactly right. And then there's a lot of more recent migrants from India and even from Africa. They think Australia's a wonderful place. They came here for a better life. And when the government seems ambivalent or indifferent to Australia Day, keeps flying 3 flags rather than 1, I think they're understandably unsettled by this. And then, of course, there's the strategic weakness. Now, okay, Australia at one level is a long way away from the world's trouble spots. But we know that trouble anywhere in the world has a tendency to stretch out and reach even us in Australia. And I think they see a Prime Minister who's very happy to badmouth President Trump, but will not say anything at all remotely critical of President Xi of China. Now, I can understand our leader not wanting to gratuitously offend anyone, but the fact is China is our great strategic competitor. It is our long-term strategic challenge. We have to be clear-eyed about that. And the difficulty with both the Prime Minister and perhaps with the Foreign Minister as well, basically they're still radical undergraduate student leftists who see communist regimes as in some way liberation movements. And I think that's why they're constantly pulling their punches to the point of non-existence when it comes to the outrages of Beijing.
Is foreign affairs, do you think, a big issue in this election? And defence?
I think there's a general uneasiness. Yeah. Now, the truth is that we have been, I think we've been walking through Lotus Land, sleepwalking through Lotus Land for too long. One of the paradoxes of contemporary public debate in this country is that so many people, at least in the defence and foreign policy establishment, will preface almost every statement with some observations about these are the most challenging strategic times since the 1930s. And yet we've done, to put it crudely, bugger all to address all of this. Our armed forces are weaker today than they were 3 years ago. They're probably substantially weaker today than they were 10 years ago. The AUKUS submarines are great, but they're not coming for another 8+ years, and frankly, we need them now. We're retiring ships, which we should be keeping in service desperately. We're phasing out bits of hardware that we shouldn't be phasing out until it's been properly replaced. We don't have offensive and defensive missile systems. We aren't alerting our population to the need to do more for our country than we have been accustomed to for a generation or so.
How could you do that and you did it as a political leader and as Prime Minister, how would you do that in this environment, whether you were Labor leader or Liberal leader?
Well, John, I think we've got to be honest with the public. Now, it's a much more dangerous world. Look at Putin's aggression against Ukraine. Look at the ongoing Iranian assault on Israel and general destabilisation of the Middle East. Look at the perhaps imminent Chinese assault on Taiwan. And even if these don't result in further major military conflict, they will gravely destabilise the wider world. Now look at the reluctance of the Trump administration to continue to bear the burden of peacekeeping, which the Americans traditionally have borne over the last 7 decades. How do you think the Japanese are going to respond to the doubts about ongoing American military commitment to their own security? How do you think the South Koreans are going to respond to doubts about the permanence of the American troop presence in South Korea? Almost certainly they are going to substantially rearm themselves. Frankly, under those circumstances, they should substantially rearm. I think it's quite likely that we will see a proliferation of nuclear weapons from countries that no longer feel that they can take the American nuclear umbrella for granted. Even if, as I said, there is no further armed conflict, given what we can see unfolding before our very eyes, there is going to be a ratcheting up of tensions, there is going to be an inevitable increase in military expenditure, there's going to be a likely, as I say, proliferation of nuclear weapons. This is a much more complicated and a much more dangerous world for Australia to navigate. And we need to be honest and upfront about that. And we need to say to our public, to our people, more may be demanded of you than you are accustomed to have to give. We can't say for certain that our country will continue to exist forever in peace. We can't say that our democratic and free way of life will not be challenged quite quickly, given all of the developments that are happening around us.
So, Tony, as we start talking about the campaign, and there wouldn't be a state, hardly a seat that you haven't campaigned in. Why is none of this on the agenda? Why is it that this sort of conversation, this discussion seems to be absent? And as many people have commented, you've seen many election campaigns and participated and won them. None of this seems to be reflected in the debate. Election campaigns seem to be perpetually dumbed down. Every election campaign is dumber than the last. It takes us more for granted than the last.
Well, John, these are the sorts of conversations that are best not had in the heat of the campaign. These are the sorts of conversations that you've got to be having in the most propitious times, not the least propitious times. So these are the sorts of conversations that we should have been having over the last 5 years, because then we would be in a better position to deal with the election.
Why do you think
campaign.
we have, and this is not about, again, Labor or Liberal, this is about the entire political class, because as you say, defence people will talk about it, security journalists will talk about it, but it's absent.
It doesn't percolate.
It doesn't
into the
percolate.
public.
Why?
No.
Is it because experts want to keep control of it? Is it because we think that Australians shouldn't be frightened? They're not ready for it? What do you think it is?
To some extent, John, it's the natural ostrich syndrome. We would rather not think about the very difficult things. We would particularly rather not think about things that would require substantial change from us. If we are to spend a lot more on the military, we're going to have to find savings elsewhere. If we are going to have more guns, almost by definition, we'll get less butter. If we are going to spend more on the military, inevitably more of us are going to have to be involved one way or another in the military, either in defence industries or perhaps as defence personnel, or perhaps as people who are being, if you like, earmarked for possible use in some kind of a national crisis or a defence emergency. I mean, Mike Pizzullo has been writing and speaking about this, the former head of the Department of Home Affairs, a former defence official. He was the head of border protection during the Operation Sovereign Borders period under my government. A very, very aware, deeply informed, very public-spirited official who should still be at the heart of government. Mike has reminded us that until the 1950s or 60s, we had a war book, an official war book, which was basically the best government thinking about what our country would need to do if faced with this existential challenge. What would our military needs be? What would our economic mobilisation needs be? What would our manpower needs be?
So I assume that book is
things that we would have to
under lock and
stockpile.
key in the Prime Minister's safe.
Well,
isn't it?
We I can't say.
You were briefed on it.
I can't say it was brought to my attention in my time as Prime Minister. So if it's in some locked safe, it's a safe which hasn't been disturbed for many a long year. And maybe it does need to be opened up and brought out and brought up to date. I mean, this is something that the late, great Jim Molan talked constantly about. We have something less than 30 days supply of liquid fuels in this country. And the first thing that would happen in the event of serious tension between China and Taiwan is that shipping in the South China Sea and probably in the Western Pacific more generally would all stop.
Then we would be saving a lot of money on petrol because there'd be none of it.
No, and it's all very well saying that we've got supplies earmarked in the United States to be brought to this country in an emergency, but how would they get here? We don't actually have the ships of our own to bring them across, and normal commercial ships under those circumstances would be very difficult to requisition. We don't have the Australian flagships to requisition that we've had in earlier decades. So there's a cascading series of challenges that we need to come to grips with. I mean, essentially, John, what we need to be thinking of in this new and much less safe, secure and certain world, we need to be thinking about what do we need to be able to do here in this country? What do we need to stockpile here in this country? What can we rely on our friends for? And what are we prepared to trust the wider world to provide us with? We need to do some very deep thinking about this. I mean, what is, strictly speaking, necessary to keep this country going for a week, a month, a year, a decade, in the absence of the sorts of things that we currently take for granted? And I suppose underlying all of this, John, is the fact that for at least a decade now, but particularly over the last 3 years, we've been engaged in a process of economic and social self-harm. It's almost to the point of economic self-destruction. The way we have damaged our energy security, the way we have jeopardised our industrial base, the way we have prejudiced our future prosperity by demonising the resource exports, particularly the fossil fuel, the coal and the gas exports, which are two of our three biggest exports. I mean, this is almost criminal. And yet it's happening, and at least if you are to judge by this current election campaign, it might be slowed down, maybe even stopped if the coalition gets elected, but it will be accelerated if Labor gets elected.
So before we talk about national defence and the reshoring of manufacturing under Trump's tariffs, that's his aim, how do you think the campaign is going 1 week in?
Well, I want to be optimistic about it, John. I mean, I think that Peter Dutton is a wonderful man. I know him very well. He was a great colleague for many years. I think he has the potential to be Howard 2.0, if you like. He's a careful, considered, sensible person of good character, good values and good instincts. I think a lot of his senior colleagues are very impressive. So I think there's no doubt that a Dutton government would be good for Australia, certainly much better than the current government. But if you believe the opinion polls, what was looking more likely a few months ago is now looking less likely. But I'm conscious of the fact that we've still got more than 3 weeks to go. A lot can happen in 3 weeks. I suspect there's still 1 or 2 significant policy announcements up the coalition's sleeves. I think that already on what we've seen so far, there's a lot of very positive stuff out there. I mean, your power bills should go down, given that Peter Dutton will get more gas into the system and end the nuclear ban. Your housing costs should go down, given that Peter Dutton will cut back hard on immigration, at least until infrastructure is caught up. He'll make it much easier for first home buyers to get a foot in the door by giving them access to their super. I think that the cut in the fuel tax is going to be an immediate shot in the arm, particularly for people in outer metropolitan and regional Australia. And look, this whole kind of politically correct green left agenda, Peter Dutton will resist all of that, whether it's the march of wokery in schools, whether it's the constant parading of three flags.
He did seem to be resisting it. I think many Australians who don't have the luxury of working from home were looking at the public servants in Canberra thinking, yes, well, you should be in the office like me or doing something, whereas it seems that Peter Dutton and the Liberals are sucked in to working from home issues and not dealing with some of the big issues that you have just outlined. Is that a question of discipline? Is it a question of just not responding to whatever the ABC or Guardian puts to you? What do you think has happened?
Well, John, this is where you've got to really be talking about the big issues, not just over a 5-week campaign, but really over a 3-year term of Parliament. You've got to start talking about what is fundamentally good, what is fundamentally suboptimal with our country as things stand, and what are the sorts of things that we need to be looking at in order to improve. And as I said, I think Peter Dutton and his senior colleagues have got very sound instincts on all of this. But it's one thing to have sound instincts. It's another thing to create the public
and
conversation,
narrative,
which is going to bring the public with you on the difficult issues as well as the easier ones. And because in the end, I think that the Australian public, at least where their thoughts are engaged and their interests are involved, I think the public are pretty sensible. And I think the public concluded at least 6 months ago that the Albanese government definitely did not deserve to be re-elected. Have they concluded that the Dutton opposition deserves its go? Well, that's what the next 3.5 weeks are all about.
How much blame can Trump take for this? So I'll talk about Trump and the tariffs in a moment, but the media love talking about the Trump effect, whether it's Canada, whether it's Australia. They love talking about Doge. What do you think, if any, is the Trump effect in Australian politics?
And it's interesting that Anthony Albanese and his colleagues now love talking about Trump.
Don't they?
Because whenever they're talking about Trump, they're not talking about cost of living.
Exactly.
Again, it's part of the distraction agenda. Now, let's give the new president credit. He is doing pretty much exactly what he said he would do during the campaign.
For good or for real.
And generally speaking, we need politicians who are more upfront before an election and then get it done after an election. So at that level at least, big tick to Donald Trump and his team. I think that he's fundamentally on the right track with wanting to reindustrialise America. And I think he's fundamentally on the right track with wanting to alert America's allies to the fact that they've all got to lift their game. We cannot take for granted that America will forever be able to solve our problems for us. That said, I do think that there are big issues with the way this tariff campaign has been prosecuted. I'm all in favour of heavy tariffs on China because China has taken advantage of free trade but never practiced it. It's stolen technology, it's engaged in secret subsidies, it's rorted markets, it's, in a sense, deliberately undercut other countries to dominate markets which it then exploits. So, look, there's a lot to be said for high tariffs on your strategic foes. I don't think there's much to be said for tariffs on your friends, and that's what we've got at this point in time. Now, if this is all just, if you like, a bit of the art of the deal, until such time as we get reciprocity on very low or even zero tariffs, well, maybe this is just a bit of, I suppose, softening up for a better outcome.
What would you be saying to Trump?
Well, look, I've always thought that the Anglosphere countries are essentially family. I've always believed in the essential unity of the English-speaking peoples. I've always thought that when the chips are down, we will all stick by each other, as was the case in 2 world wars and has been the case
in a few minor wars too.
Throughout the post-war period up till now. The two countries that the United States has always been able to rely upon are Britain and Australia. Now, that's not to say that Britain and Australia don't need to do more to strengthen our economies, to strengthen our armed forces. But we are the friends through thick and thin that countries need no less than individuals need. So I would just, I suppose, remind the President of these fundamental facts. And I would say to him, look, in terms of domestic policy, strong borders, drill baby drill so that you've got absolute energy security, you maximise your prosperity, cut out all this politically correct wokery inside the boardroom. This is all very sensible, but in a sense, don't prejudice the great American achievement in your desire to get other countries to face up to reality very, very quickly. I mean, America can take tremendous pride in the post-World War, in the post-war world that it has largely created. I mean, until very recently, the modern world was more safe, more free, more fair, more rich for more people than at any time in human history. And that is largely the result of the peace and the prosperity and the benevolence which the United States has fostered. I mean, Britain in the 19th century, America in the 20th century have been the world's most benevolent hegemons. They are the two countries that successively have had both the strength and the benevolence to be effective global policemen. And it would be a tragedy for the world if America were to retreat into a kind of hemispheric isolationism and to effectively say to the Chinese communists, you've got a free hand in Asia, to effectively say to the fascist in the Kremlin, you've got a free hand in Europe. It would be a tragedy in the immediate term for everyone, and in the long term, it would be a disaster for the United States were this to happen. So I guess that's what I'd be saying to people in Washington right now. Do not underestimate the magnificence of your achievement. Don't resent it. Take pride in it. And yes, work to ensure that you are not, in a sense, being taken advantage of by friend or by foe, but don't, in the process, throw out the baby with the bathwater.
On that note, Tony, thank you very much for being with us on Australia's Future.
Thanks, John.
This is a production of the Centre for the Australian Way of Life at the Institute of Public Affairs. To find out more, visit australia.ipa.org.au.